Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here. And I humbly thank you for joining me. Today is a new segment of my story time. And for those who don't know, my story time is where I tell my story as a way to counter the ever changing official narrative of history, his story. Because no one, not even AI, can tell my life story as a direct reflection of the times in which I lived better than me. And this is where I'm telling it. Now, the story that wants to be told today is coming in from around 1987, and it begins in Denver, Colorado, where I'd just gotten a new job that I was scheduled to start on a Monday, but was forced to delay my start date because I got extremely sick with what I thought was the flu the Thursday or Friday before, much to my anxiety and great dismay. Now, I understand that the majority of my storytime episodes thus far are experiences I've had throughout the 1980s. The 1980s was an important time for me. It catalyzed, without a doubt, big changes in my life. And a lot happened in that decade. A lot. And by the time I had my Saturn return, for those who know astrology, in the latter half of that decade, my entire life had completely flipped and my first marriage had come to an end. Much happened throughout the 1990s as well. However, a lot of what occurred during the 90s, during that decade, was written about in my book and biography, Living the Big Sky Life. A link to my book is below for anyone who's interested. And I'm not generally inclined to repeat those stories because I already wrote about them from my perspective at that time. Suffice to say, my focus right now is more on the 1980s, the decade leading up to my big sky life. Okay, I had been maybe 3 or 4 months without a job by this time, before I was hired by Gog of Magog. I did do several videos about my experience with Gog of Magog, and I'll include a link above to some of those. I think I did 3 videos about Gog. In that 3 or 4 month time frame that I had no job, I had no health insurance. And I can't remember if Cobra insurance coverage was even available to me at that time. Maybe it was, but Cobra was very expensive. And as I'm sure many of you know, not having health insurance was a big problem, especially if you had any health issue like it is now, right? But health insurance back then was harder to come by if you had anything the insurance company could perceive to be a pre-existing condition. A pre-existing condition was indefinitely a barrier to coverage. And it would typically be no less than 90 to 120 days working for a new company before you could become eligible for group coverage through that company. I can't speak to the timeframes for health insurance today, the rules that apply, but I don't think you can be denied coverage today for a pre-existing condition like you could in the 80s. And it was through my group health insurance from work that health insurance coverage was provided for my family as well, not just for myself. Husband number one, who I was married to at that time in the 80s, was a self employed contractor and he had no real pathway to coverage. So it all came down to me. Frankly, a lot of things came down to me. So, anyhow, I got sick, real sick, like I've never been sick before, down for the count sick and bedridden. And then the coughing began, a deep, heavy, wet coughing. 2 days before I was to begin my new job with GOG. Thing is, it showed no signs of improving with time. The coughing kept getting worse, and I wasn't recovering as I was accustomed to when getting sick with the flu or even a cold. During the weeks leading up to this, my husband at the time and I were looking into buying a new used car for me. The car we were looking into buying was a Cadillac Seville. If any of you are familiar with this older version of the Cadillac, the company only made this body style for 4 years, from 1976 to 1979, and this was the one I was interested in. It wasn't a big priority, but it was something on our agenda. It's a side note, but I'll get back to the Cadillac. As I mentioned in my GOG video, I had to call in sick my first day. I no-showed on Monday because I was too sick to get out of bed, literally. But I forced myself to show up on Tuesday, cough and all, because I couldn't afford to lose this job due to illness. And it became apparent to everyone in the office I wasn't pulling a fast one. Gog was leaving town that Tuesday afternoon, fortunately. So I dropped him off at Stapleton Airport so he could catch his plane and decided that I really needed to get medical care before going home. Insurance or not, something was wrong, and I knew it. I went to the ER. I went to the emergency room in Littleton, the little hospital in Littleton, and was told that had I waited another day, they would have hospitalized me. I had double pneumonia, and I was exhausted. So exhausted. I just wanted to cry. If any of you have ever seen or read this old self help book from the 1980s by Louise Hay called You Can Heal Your Life, well, I had a copy of that. You can look up and read what she describes to be the energetic and spiritual causes for pneumonia. It says feeling like the walls are closing in, can't breathe, desperate, tired of life, emotional wounds that aren't allowed to heal. That was her assessment. Well, that was me. That was me, and my body had apparently had enough of me ignoring my emotions through controlled suppression. My life up to that point, in fact, most of my life, was simply not a safe place for my emotions to be. And there were more than a few reasons for that. The doctor in the ER prescribed me a codeine cough syrup that didn't help a whole lot overall because the coughing spasms continued and they were brutal. So brutal, in fact, that I cracked a rib on my right side. That was later verified by an x-ray during my follow-up visit. And if any of you have ever broken or fractured a rib, you would know that there's absolutely nothing to be done about it except suffer through it for the 6 weeks it takes to heal. And by suffering through it, I mean every breath you take reminds you of the break because it sends shooting pains through your rib cage. Every laugh makes you want to die. It required me to lay motionless on my back in bed to avoid the pain should I dare to roll on my side or breathe too deeply. All said, it took no less than 2 months for me to mostly recover from the pneumonia and the rib it cracked. During this 2 month period, it became unquestionably apparent that my marriage was coming to an end on top of everything else. Okay, so now back to the Cadillac Seville. My husband had found a car that matched our needs and was scheduled to check it out on Tuesday after work. This was the Tuesday that I'd forced myself to show up at my new job while sick so I wouldn't lose it. This was also the Tuesday that I had to take myself to the emergency room without insurance on my way home from work because I was too sick to function. I was a no-show to checking out the new car. Cell phones were clearly not a thing back there. And my decision to go to the ER came after I dropped Gog off at the airport and it was on my drive home. There was no way to communicate a message to him or for him to communicate a message to me. But let me tell you that when I finally got home from the hospital that evening, I got assaulted by his anger for showing no interest in buying this car by not showing up. blah, blah, blah. He didn't care that I was sick or how sick I was. He didn't care that I had just spent the last 3 hours in a hospital. He never even asked how I was. All he cared about was that I didn't bother to come with him to look at this car. A car he did buy, by the way. Sounds like he didn't need me after all, right? The funny thing is about that car was that I really liked it. I would love to have that car today. In fact, my 14-year-old daughter, on the other hand, had a different opinion entirely about that old 1977 Cadillac, and it stemmed from embarrassment. Prior to the Cadillac, I'd had a shiny new Thunderbird. The Thunderbird was a beautiful car, a V8 with lots of power and a nice racy body style. Not only did it not handle the winter conditions of Denver very well, especially the icy roads. I learned that the hard way. But it was a lemon. The car was a lemon. It seemed like it was in the shop more than it wasn't. And I got tired of living with car terrorism, and that car needed to go. I remember shortly after getting the Cadillac, I had agreed to pick up my daughter and her friends from the Elitch's amusement park. Now, Elitch's was the Disneyland of Colorado, I guess you could say. It was in Northwest Denver. I lived all the way in Southwest Denver in Littleton. This was way in Northwest Denver. When I arrived, she was there at the gate waiting with her friends, and I heard her shamefully apologizing to her friends for my car as she was opening the door to let them in. She was saying, "Oh, my mom used to have a cool car, but now she has this." Well, let me tell you, she was there with 5 or 6 of her friends, big kids, plus herself. Had I shown up in that Thunderbird, there would have been no way I could have packed those teenagers into that T-Bird. Different story with the old Cadillac and its big cushy bench seats. Seatbelts, of course, were not a requirement in the 80s. And while I didn't have enough seatbelts for everyone, I did have enough room to fit 5 or 6 of them in the back seat and at least 2 of them in the front next to me as the driver. Sure put a different spin on the whole "my mom used to have a cool car" thing. I also found out later that she used to sneak the Thunderbird out for joyrides when I wasn't looking. Apparently, the Cadillac put an end to that. And by the way, I did take the Cadillac when I divorced husband number one. It lasted with me until the engine needed replacement, and I wasn't in a position to make that happen. I wasn't sad to see the marriage go, but I was sad to say goodbye to my Cadillac. End of a chapter, to be sure. So, in conclusion, and for whatever it's worth, this is my little protest against his story. This is me telling my story my way. For the record, it's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I would love to hear your stories as well, so please feel free to share your stories in the comments. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.